All right. Well, welcome. We're excited to have everyone here today. We really appreciate everyone coming to our session today. It seems like we have quite the eclectic crowd today. I appreciate also our interpreters and Caitlin for facilitating for us today. And so welcome to our session, and we're excited to be here. So just as a quick reminder on our second slide, we will be recording today's session today for people who are unable to attend, and the recording will start now. And then I'm going to pop in and give a quick introduction of who I am, and then I'll toss it over to Ryan, and then we'll get things rolling. So really quickly, I've been working in education for 15 years. My current role is the physical education content specialist at Chicago Public Schools. So I manage the program, the physical education program district-wide, deal a lot with policy and professional learning, as well as just basically anything that needs to be done within the program. My interest in food justice really came about through my involvement with a program called Pilot Light, which we'll be giving an overview of today, where I was a fellow and then continued on working with the organization as a part of their alumni network, and have done a variety of different things since I went through my initial introduction to the program as a fellow, working on program evaluation, focus groups, several speaking engagement opportunities just like this, and then also working with fellows that are currently in the program. And then with that, I'm going to toss it over to Ryan.
Thank you so much. My name is Ryan Johnson. I am a 7th and 8th grade science teacher at Jovita Idar Elementary School on the southwest side of Chicago. If you're just joining in now, please introduce yourself in the chat. It's been really cool kind of seeing everybody that's coming in here. Just like Paul said, I also was a Pilot Light Fellow, and I'm going to be sharing a lot of what Pilot Light gave back for my students and me and the community, and then also the leveraging points that we were able to do and build after going through the Pilot Light program that hopefully we can inspire others and give others ideas about what you can do in your areas. You are muted, Paul.
Yes, unmuting is important in virtual PL. So I just want to drop the deck and these three links into the chat. They're just kind of for your reference point. So the first one is the participant deck. So you have all the links that are embedded within this slideshow today. So if there's any reference points or thing that you would like to look at after this session, you'll have those available too. We also have a quick useful starting points for Pilot Light and any food education in your classrooms would be a nice resource for you to take a look at that Ryan put together for us. And then also the Pilot Light lesson bank, which is also, also our Pilot Light lesson bank as well, where there are free lessons for teachers to access and use within their classrooms. So we're going to start things out with a quick little icebreaker on our next slide. And this is one of my favorite Pilot Light activities. It's called a food memoir. So we do is I usually start all my Pilot Light, I guess my years out with this Pilot Light lesson where we talk about a food memory a memory that we have surrounding food that's positive. So I'm just going to give you a couple seconds. We'll go give about 30 seconds for you to think about a memory that you are that's positive surrounding food. And then if you are able to either share it in the chat or not sure if we have the capability for people to go off mute and share. Just go ahead and drop that positive food memory into the chat. And I'll give an example. One of my positive food memories, we were big fans of Aurelio's pizza in my family. And so kind of every Sunday night, that was the big thing in our house. And just a lot of good memories surrounding that. And so that was a big positive memory in our family. It was always kind of a big connector within our family. All right, so we'll give some time, think about those, and then if you're able to go off mute, go ahead and we'd love to hear some stories. Seeing some good memories, corned beefs on St. Patrick's Day, going to Peru and having a local guide break open Pow and give us a taste of pulp inside. Wow. Lots of great things coming in the chat. Eating out with families on special occasions, coffee time, same. Birthday cookie cakes. Pierogies. Tuesday brunch. All right. Lots of great things coming in on the chat. Appreciate those contributions. I think they're still coming. We'll give it another 10, 20 seconds. And as I say that, they were slowing down. All right, great. So just the purpose of this activity, this is one that I really love because it really, in a lot of ways, although the food may be different between some of these stories, a lot of the feelings and the stories are very much the same. And it really provides a great opportunity for my students to connect with each other and really relate in a lot of ways, an identity level. And so once we kind of get into these types of conversations with students, content really becomes easy and really becomes a focal point and a really a positive focal point for at least my students coming in and talking about pilot light and food and really kind of generate a lot of passion and enthusiasm in my classes and really became a piece of my physical education program that students really related to and really enjoyed. All right, we're going to pop into that next slide and we're going to talk a little bit about our agenda and our time today. So today, just went through the introduction, had a quick little icebreaker with a food memoir. I'm going to get into a little bit of nutrition education, what we think students need to know. We'll go through a brief Pilot Light program overview, and then Ryan and I are going to share our experiences with Pilot Light and what that looked like in our classrooms and how that impacted our students, our school, and our community. So we'll pop into that next slide. Couple of community agreements right here before we get rolling. So first one, allow yourselves the luxury of doing one thing. I know all of us are very busy and have a lot of things on our plate, but this is really a nice moment to be present if you can, and get the most that you can out of this session and really hear about this amazing program that Ryan and I have been a part of and have continued to be a part of years after our initial fellowship. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them to clarify. And then we would really love for you just to enjoy this process and practice kindness with yourself and others over in this session. If there's anything that you'd like to add or change or discuss, please go ahead and drop those into the chat and I'll give you about 10 seconds to look them over and then we'll get started. All right, we are going to move to that next slide. So what do we need to know? All right, and our next slide right here. So my question for the group, and feel free to drop this in the chat or go off mute. What do you feel is important for all people to know surrounding food? Or what do you think is important for our students in an educational setting to know around food? So we'd just like to hear, just off the top of your head, what are some things that you would like for them to know, either people in general or in an educational setting? Where it comes from, love that. How it's made. We are what we eat. The impact of food on mental health. How to grow your own plants. Seasonal items echoing these sentiments. I love it. Learning about vitamins, how to take care of yourself. Who made it? Microbiome, love it. Everyone has different nutritional needs, and that'll come up in some of my examples coming up. All right, that's a great start. We're going to go into that next slide and talk about nutrition and food education standards. So part of my motivation for getting involved in Pilot Light, it started initially with kind of all good things in education. My families and students were really craving that. We did surveys at the end of every school year to see what students really wanted to learn about in their program, and then I also solicited feedback from parents as well, just to give them a voice in their education and show that their voice mattered, and really to increase that engagement and teach them what they wanted to know. And I was very lucky in my school to have some flexibility, and that's when I found Pilot Light and I started looking through different standards. So the Illinois state standards and learning standards, the national health education standards, the SHAPE and CDC kind of guidelines, and then I found Pilot Light. And we'll go to that next slide. And this is kind of what I found. The state standards and the SHAPE standards were very similar in a lot of ways. And I found Pilot Light standards to be just a little bit different. It really kind of went to the depth that I wanted to, and kind of the different, I guess, facets to food education that really, I didn't feel like those standards covered in the same way. Not to say that they weren't important, but I think there was a kind of a piece to that when we look at all the things that we talked about in our chat, that there was just so much more depth and um, content that I really wanted my students to kind of experience. And that's where I kind of found my home, with Pilot Light and the Pilot Light Fellowship. All right, we're going to go ahead to that next slide. All right. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to take a look at these standards. They're on the right side of the slide right here. There are 7. And if any of those really stand out to you, just go ahead and drop that number in the chat. Anything that really resonates with you, or for whatever context you're looking at these standards. Okay. Yes. All right, great. Here goes to that next slide. All right. So each of these 7 standards, they were developed several years ago, with a group of experts, that kind of developed kind of these conversations that we're having now, and talking about kind of like how multifaceted this subject is. And each of these standards on the Pilot Light website has some really interesting resources. They go into depth and talk a little bit about how each of these different standards can be addressed in specific grade bands. I'm going to drop one thing into the chat right here. Okay. So the first link that I'm going to drop in is the landing page for the FES standards. It provides, it's kind of it's the landing page for the 7 different FBS standards. And you can go ahead and click on any of the different standards. It'll give you a little bit more in-depth description of what those look like. And it'll bring you to a page where it'll show you the different grade bands and what that standard looks like in those different grade bands. So I just want to provide that resource to you all. So if you want to take a closer look, this is just an easy on-ramp to kind of getting a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of these standards. And at the bottom of each page, you can download a full guide to all 7 standards. So I just think it's a good resource if you're interested in this program and kind of taking a closer look. So I just want to include that in there. Go ahead and hop into the next slide. All right, so Pilot Light overview. So very briefly, what is Pilot Light? And so Pilot Light is a Chicago-based nonprofit organization that connects with chefs and teachers to create food-based classroom lessons that support children with knowledge, attitudes, and skills they need for healthy relationships. So really, they engage teachers and help them teach food education within their classrooms and provide different supports and in a year-long program. And like I said, it's been really transformational within my classroom, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into what that looks like in a bit. Okay, our next slide right here. So how did this all start? The founders of Pilot Light answered the Obama administration's call to action to integrate food education into our school systems, which ultimately resulted in this organization and resulted in the Pilot Light Fellowship, which is on our next slide. So our fellowship is really broken down into 4 sections. So first thing is teacher training. If when you become a fellow with Pilot Light, there's summer training where everyone comes together for the class of fellows for that year. We do a quick overview of the program, show you the teacher bank of lessons, and then there's some team building amongst your the fellows within the program. And then at that point, it's somewhat of a choose your own adventure. You get to take at those look at those different lesson plans, look at what your students' needs are, and create your own program, which is honestly some of the magic of this program, because it really can be tailored into something that is going to mean the most to your students, and is really going through those different lessons and looking at everything that they have to offer and all the things that teachers create. It's really just it's like sitting down with a good book. There's like some amazing things in there, and you're just like, wow, that I could take a piece of this and put it here. And it really kind of fosters some thinking that could be um, really beneficial, especially in my content area where we create the majority of our curriculum. And I can really kind of pick the pieces that I thought were the best and put them into different aspects of our program. The next step, the school year starts. You integrate Pilot Light lessons into your program. Um, usually once a week, but there's also this flexibility with that because, as I said, it is a somewhat of a choose your own adventure with this program and finding what fits best for you. And then at the end of your program, um, you have an advocacy project with your students for food advocacy, which ranges from anything from, I think in our program, we talked about, we were in the middle of COVID and we talked a little bit about advertisement because there was a big interest within my students and kind of was one of the tangents we had gone and talked quite a bit about in my program just because student interest. But we've had other fellows who have done things like change policy within their schools. With your with an advocacy project, but really teaching that piece and breaking down the skills of advocacy, which I think is really important to teach our students. And then at the end of the fellowship, teachers that contribute to lessons to continue to expand the program and provide different resources to teachers. Um, and then if you are interested in learning more about this fellowship and the participant deck, I've also included a link that will take you to that page. All right. Now to my personal fun, the fun part for me, talking about what Pilot Light meant to my kids and my school. So we've gotten through all the kind of the structure of Pilot Light, but let's talk a little bit about how we implemented it in that program. So we're going to go into our first slide right here, and I'm going to talk about how nutrition education looked a little bit in my program prior to Pilot Light, and then where it went as we kind of evolved as a program. So initially, it was very much nutrition based. So, what are the nutrition facts? What are the 5 food groups? All those fun things that we all probably learned in school. We did games like we would have some play food on the floor, and we would do a race, and I would we'd have two. They'd have 2 options. I'd either have a protein or a vegetable together. Out protein, and they would grab the protein off, and that would help them learn those food groups and also get a little competition. And I'd have them rotate to another plate. Same thing. They would have a different protein, different vegetable, call it out. So that's how we started. It was great. They learned the very basics of kind of what nutrition education was. So we're going to go ahead and hop into the next slide. And then we would get some relay races where they would create, again, kind of the basics of nutrition education. They would create my plate thing. So we would have all the play food on the other end, and they would create a balanced meal based on my plate running back and forth. All right, then we're going to start talking about where Pilot Light came in a bit for me. So then there's a few lessons that they had that I had read through that were pretty compelling. So a lot of my students, we're doing some stuff where we're talking about a little bit of budgeting and that sort of thing, and kind of one of those kind of off the cuff moments. And so I was reading through a few of Pilot Light's lessons and saw some lessons about seasonality of food, and talking to my students about that concept and how that impacts cost. Because a lot of them are pretty sensitive to that when they grocery shopping. And so we took that relay race where they would run down and create a My Plate, and then I would have them pop into an iPad, take a look at this app for seasonality of food, and then they could see whether those foods were in season. And if they weren't in season, they could adjust My Plate to be more cost effective and less cost effective. And that kind of led to some good class discussions towards the end of our lessons where we could have those types of conversations. All right, then we're going to go into our next slide. Here. Another piece of this. So a lot of times in our physical education classes, we would talk about um, food analysis and talking about some of those basic nutrition facts about um, sodium intake per day, calories per day, and what that looks like. And one of the, I think, the great things about Pilot Light and was always present, but definitely was emphasized even more through this program, is that no food is either good or bad, but making informed decisions about food is important. And so it's really we kind of brought home that concept through this program, and it was, I think, it was even highlighted the importance of this philosophy just because students' identities are so closely tied to food. And so this really kind of gave us a good platform to have those conversations and not make food good or bad, just making informed decisions about the food that we're eating. All right, we'll go to that next slide. All right, and so then this was our one of our final lessons that we did with Pilot Light. So we did a lesson that's called "What is Sushi?" And basically, it was the introduction to sushi, which a lot of my kids had never experienced before. And so we started out talking about kind of like origin story of sushi and kind of some of those like you know cultural pieces to what sushi is, and so we were in the middle of COVID, so we got kind of deep into some of these conversations that we probably wouldn't have been able to outside of the situation we're in, but they got really into it. And then we popped into some games once they came back into the classroom related to sushi. So on our next slide, we did a sushi activity. So I had noodles within my classroom, and one end we cut down to about a 1/4 inch noodles on the other side of the gym, put a bunch of them on the other side, and they had these small noodles. They would run down, pick them up, like my friend in the picture right there, bring them back, put them on his plate, and then he would run back and get more. And at the lowest level, we would talk about kind of the history, and then we would jump a little bit into some of these relay races, and then made a little bit more complex as we move through the upper grades. So I would talk about different types of sushi, and then this would be the basis of talking about the origins of food, and saying your sashimi, tamaki, tamago. What are those things? And then I would go and I would put the next slide up on the projector in my gym, and we would have them create plates of, whatever I create. I had a sushi menu for them, and they would have to start creating these different plates on a relay. And we would take it a step further. And for my sixth graders, we would do ratios. And we would have those conversations, and then we go into different ratios where they'd have a 2-to-1 ratio or a 2-1-2 ratio. And then we would go from there. So that's what kind of Pilot Light looked like in my particular program. And then we're going to talk about the results. What do the results look like? We have both quantitative and qualitative data. So in the beginning of in the summer session, Pilot Light provided a survey for our students to take, and so that gives us kind of the baseline, at least for my students, to figure out which standards we really needed to focus on as a program, and then that would somewhat drove how I would choose the different lessons as we went through our units. So on our next slide, the results. So huge strengths. No surprise in a physical education classroom, food impacts health. Very strong with my students, but there were different pieces of that I saw that really improved. And part of that was that philosophy where I was talking, no food is actually good or bad. We're just making informed decisions about our food. And then the vast majority of students believe that food connects them in some ways to others, which I think was really nice to see. And just from, an affective or an SEL component was a big connector across our classes. And so it was really, that was a bit of the kind of the magic of Pilot Light in my school is we were again in the middle of COVID, half transitioning back, half not, and everyone was really starved for connection, and that was one of the best parts of this program is it is such a connector between our kids. So areas of improvement, I looked at the different questions and questions that had the least amount of improvement. I kind of centered in on, and we were going to really look at creating more learning opportunities for students to learn how food behaviors are influenced by internal and external factors, and saw that trend. And so in my following school year, I really honed in on that and adjusted my lessons. And then we also found that answers indicated that I needed to find opportunities to connect knowledge to action, especially with food choices. And we did some work with our families the following year to kind of connect that knowledge to action. All right, now the fun part right here for me was some of the qualitative data. And in our next slide, I have pictures of one of my students. So one of our two favorite activities that were just quick little things we could do was the food memoir that we started with today. And one of the things that we spoke about was um, dragon fruit, and one of my kids was their favorite food that they had, and we got back on Zoom the next day, and one of my students had actually tried dragon fruit and brought that in. I also had a lot of students going to Mariano's and trying sushi for the first time and talking about those experiences. And so this was kind of the fun part where we kind of got to see the actual impact of some of the things that we were talking about within our classrooms. And then our next slide, this is kind of it's one of our big events that we did, and Caitlin was our facilitator. We had a chef come in and do a live stream, and we cooked pancakes and I think it was apple pancakes that we cooked together, and had a lot of conversation with Chef James, who was opening a restaurant, and so we got to talk about not only about the cooking and the origin of apples and all of that, but we got to talk about his process for opening a business. And for a lot of my kids, not many of their families were business owners, so it was a really interesting piece for them to kind of have exposure to. Um, Side note, Chef James and I became friends after this, so Pilot helped me out socially and professionally, so that was great. But he has been a big contributor to Pilot as well, and has really kind of been a great reference point for me, even after our cooking event. And the kids still talk about that time we all cooked on Zoom together and did that. And Pilot Light provided funding for the ingredients as well. All right.
My goodness, Paul, that was great. Did you have anything you wanted to end with there?
What was that?
Did you have anything else that you wanted to say? I feel like that was just like and done.
No, I think I'm good. Unless anyone has any questions.
Have you looked at the qualitative and quantitative data about how much gamification you guys are doing with the kids? There's so much really cool research coming out about gamification and education. And so combining that with the nutrition education, I'm wondering if you saw a jump in the SELs and the outcomes when adding the kind of gaming component to it.
Did you say SEL outcomes? I'm sorry.
Like your SELs and your learning objectives. Have you seen any like jumps in? I guess my question would be, were you using different tactics before, and did you see an improved outcome when adding that gamification, or is that something that Pilot Light integrated like at the very base level as they got off the ground?
I was, I believe I might have been one of the first PE teachers in particular. So a lot of mine, I was integrating different pieces of some of their literacy and math lessons into my class. And so gamification was a big part of our program already. But I will say that in terms of like SEL outcomes, the content in Pilot Light was a big connector because of, like I said, food is so closely tied to our students' identity. It really was a moment for people to really relate on an identity level, and it really just kind of built those relationships and made it a very powerful experience for them. And so it became very quickly a focal point, and something that they really connected to and look forward to every week.
Well, that was fabulous, Paul. Thank you so much. So just as a quick introduction and reminder, so my name is Ryan Johnson. I am a 7th and 8th grade science teacher at Hoviti Dar Elementary School, which is on the southwest side of Chicago in Gage Park. Please feel free, if you haven't already, like, give yourself a good stretch and be kind to yourself. Definitely get something to eat or drink if you need to, because I feel like if we fuel our bodies, we can then fuel our minds and be our best versions of ourselves. I'll do my best to kind of watch the chat, but please feel free to drop any questions into the chat as they come up. Also feel free to please interrupt me as I'm talking if you need additional clarification or if you want to know more information, just because I'm in the middle of something. I don't want you to lose your train of excellence. So to start here, this is my school. It looks like a spaceship, which is interesting because the architect who built it obviously builds very beautiful buildings, but as a school, it was quite terrible. For example, shoving 120 students into one hallway with the lockers because that's where they fit in the building. And that has not been great in terms of their education, but something else that wasn't wonderful was, we have this big, beautiful building here. It was obviously like unused space before it was constructed. It was built in 2011. And there was this huge opportunity that they could have done to really use and utilize the outdoor space. And it wasn't, as you can see, part of it was astroturfed. And while I think that we do need soccer fields and things like that. They also put concrete over just about everything, a lot of, just kind of non-native grass, and that was it. And again, it looks really pretty in pictures. This one I actually stole from Jeffrey Bayer, of all people. If you guys are not from Chicago, he's like this famous Chicago tour guide. But what I've known as I've been at IDAR, I've been there for 12 years, is we were really missing this kind of community aspect of school. Everything felt really sterile. So as you can see from the map, we're on the southwest side. It serves 100% Hispanic students. And it was really like the pandemic and my participation in Pilot Light that really allowed us to start making some changes from this kind of sterile environment into something that I think is a lot more community focused, food focused, culture focused, but really just focused around health and what that means. As I see a couple of you in the little pictures there, I apologize if my dogs all of a sudden start to bark because I am at home, but we'll see if we can get through it. Go ahead and advance. So at Hoviti Dar, we strive to foster environmental awareness and responsibility by making a commitment towards sustainable practices, not only in our lessons, but how we go about our business at school, linking education with action. And that's something that I really believe in strongly. And we really could not do this alone. I know, barking at squirrels for sure. Like Paul had said, and is going to be reiterated throughout this presentation, Pilot Light was really the starting point here for so many things, and has really allowed my students to expand into all of these different opportunities, which have been really, really wonderful. So building out of Pilot Light and the Food Education Fellowship, They've been working with Take Action Global as a climate action school. So my kids get to travel and present in global conferences about what they're doing in and around urban agriculture. They were named an Ocean Guardian school last year. We were rated as a green level eco school by the National Wildlife Foundation. We were a green school from the Illinois Green School Project. This year, we've really, as you can see from the picture there in the top right, leaned into hydroponics with the Hydroponic Venture Project, which Caitlin actually got us started in, and then it's really kind of just exploded. The NASCAR Foundation has provided quite a lot of funding in and around our idea around health and how food impacts health. I really believe in that standard strongly. And then moving in, and Pilot Light just opened so many doors to Chicago for us, whether it was with the Museum of Science and Industry and Chicago Academy of Sciences with the Peggy Notabart Museum, the Morton Arboretum, and all of these different things really have only been achievable with Pilot Light. So in these pictures here, you can kind of see some of what the kids have been working through. One of the things that I believe passionately, and if you go to the one-page document about useful starting places, it's a really good jumping off point, because I really believe in everything being student driven and community generated. So really starting with what do you want to see and what would you like to happen? So while I was participating in the Pilot Light Fellowship, I opened that up to my kids and to the community, really looking through like a citizen science lens, but then expanding it out into participatory action research. And what the community wanted is they wanted that grass gone and they wanted the concrete usable, and they wanted the feeling of a school that was something that they were going to be proud of. So we really leaned in heavily about removing non-native plants, reintroducing native species and pollinator gardens and things like that, but then also into growing food and linking all of the lessons that we've done with food with the environment in sustainable circular systems. In my school community, the climate issue is something that they feel very passionate about. And it's something that I do too, which is great because we share that. But they have really asked that our science education covers climate action and then what we can do in cities in and around urban growing and farming to help with the climate issue and showing that climate resilience. Go ahead. So this is where we have gone this year. So we started something called Project Growths, which stands for Gardening, Reflection, Organizing, and Wondering through Hydroponics and Sustainability. And it's a civic action project that promotes food awareness, healthy eating, urban agriculture, circular sustainable systems, and community investment while creating these beautiful and nurturing spaces where students and their families can grow nutritious produce using hydroponic, aquaponic, and traditional systems. So this is leaning into what is our VOCA garden, which stands for Ver, Oler, Comer y Aprender, which is to see, smell, eat, and learn. And because we live in Chicago and it is very seasonal, after the success of our garden, what families really wanted was an opportunity to do this year round. And growing things hydroponically has really allowed us to do that. So right here in this big picture on the bottom right, you can see one of the hydroponic systems that was provided to us through the Hydroponic Venture Project. It's made by a company called Rise Systems, if you are interested in, and we have really had a lot of success with that unit. We've grown pounds of produce out of it and really done a lot with introducing students to new foods that they haven't really tried before, kind of like Paul alluded to earlier. I know in the comments, people said they were interested in urban farming and food justice in and around the city. And I really do believe in hydroponics as a way to do that year round. That has then really gone into aquaponics, which was something that the students were interested in. So you can see in that same picture, there are 2 small fish tanks in there. And the fish tanks are really interesting because it really is this closed loop system of growing. And that helps the students really understand where our food comes from and hit that pilot light food education standard of where does it actually come from, what does it need, and then where does it go is really where we wanted to kind of push next. So this year, my 7th and 8th graders were starting to get really concerned about the waste because we were growing all of this food and they spent all of this time growing it and taking care of it and measuring it and tracking it. I had one 7th grader that asked me, Mr. Johnson, if I have to measure one more plant, I'm going to scream. Because then we just pick it, and if it doesn't get eaten, we were getting rid of it. So they were the ones who really started us getting interested in composting. So we started with vermicomposting, which is composting with worms. You can see our initial unit right there in the back corner of that yellow table. There is a vermicomposting system. We also started raising various domestic and wild animals. So these little cute buggers here are quail. And so we started raising quail. It has been an interesting experience as we have learned to navigate that with my school network and the city of Chicago and our alderman, who is not super thrilled about it, but you know what? Sometimes you just got to do it and see what happens. And our biggest push this year was in and around decomposers and circular systems through composting. So we had the vermicomposting. We then have pushed it to more traditional compost, which you can see by this yellow bin here, weighing everything. And I think that's something that really, if you are interested in starting this either in your own school or your community center or project, is really what Paul had talked about and the value of data. Taking data, tracking data, and being honest about your data, because that is such a wonderful jumping off point for what's working, what's not, and where is there room to grow and improve. You can see this student here in the gray t-shirt. He's holding one of our giant Madagascar hissing cockroaches, which is my custodial staff was not thrilled that we decided to create a colony of them. But they are also wonderful composters. And what is so impressive about them is you can actually watch them in action. The worms it's a closed system and it's kind of difficult to track. But with the giant cockroaches, it is a much more impressive and impactful type of thing. So this whole thing of linking these things together, like going back to those pilot light food education standards and thinking about that food has sources and origins, that food connects us to each other, and that food connects us to each other and the environment as well, I think all kind of fall under this umbrella of health and what is health and what does it mean to be healthy and what does that mean to each community. Go ahead. So these were things that were brought up by students. So this top picture here is actually my 8th grade class, one of them at least, and this was our roundtable discussion where they were creating a driving question board to try and determine what our keystone beliefs were going to be and how to build foundations. So they came up with a slogan, which was that seeds of change thrive in concrete, which really just came out of all of this, paved over areas that we want to do something with, because right now it's just a bunch of, cement. So we believe as a school that climate justice and food justice are social justice issues and that they're worth fighting for, and that every single person and member of the community has a voice in how those issues should be handled at a community level. As a teacher, it's been really empowering to watch my students take ownership of this, because it could be there's danger in it being very top down from me down to them, and that is something that I passionately think should never happen in a school. They talked a lot about how the school and community-based projects should fit under one or more of the 6 R's. And we call them the 6 R's because it just happened to nicely all fit under R, of to rethink things, reduce our use, reuse, rot, recycle, and to watch our refuse, which is like the garbage. So our students are really interested in waste and what happens to our waste and where it goes and how we can reduce it, especially in and around food, because they saw how much they were throwing away at breakfast every day and lunch every day through our waste audits, and they were horrified. So if I was going to ever suggest that you start somewhere, whether you are a school or a community center or a private organization, start with a waste audit, just so you know how much you're actually getting rid of. We strive for sustainability in urban agriculture. We believe that there's big growth in small spaces, which when I first started with Pilot Light, we built a mobile garden, which is still in use and is really fun because it's on wheels, and you can get some really impressive growth in the summer, and then in the winter or in the fall, you kind of wheel it inside and use grow lights, and you can continue to grow things. And this last piece here, this FARMS acronym, FARMSS, this was something I actually thought of and created for presentations like this when I am talking to other teachers and other passionate people about, well, how do I get started? How do I do things with this? And I say, these are the things you need to think about. And it's funding. It just happens to start with F. And unfortunately, it is also a key thing. You do need funding. But then there's accountability, responsibility, maintenance, space, and then the sustainability of the system. When planning these things, it can't just be for the short term, and we all have to plan for the long term. And that's something that students struggle with because they want the immediate impact, but really trying to get them to consider 2 years from now, 5 years from now, what will this look like? Who's going to be in charge of it? And who is going to maintain it? And they have really been impressive and risen to the occasion in what they've been able to do. Go ahead. And here's kind of where they're at. So my students since 2020, with my support, Pilot Light, and then some members of the community and other teachers, they've raised almost $30,000 to put right back into the school to help make all of these things happen. This is a little old in terms of their data here, but they started the composting this year. They reached out to a company called Urban Canopy, who has been helping them with their compost project, and they've already seen over 400 pounds of food diverted, which has, got all these different offset things as well. And again, that's all student driven and generated and done, which is really impressive. And while me and my administration, sometimes we think like, oh, maybe we should just like poke them or push them in this direction because we have an idea, and we really have to sit on our hands and close our mouths because we hope that eventually they'll get there. But if they don't, it's okay because they have ownership over this project. You can see these 2 kiddos here with their little flower sale, really trying to raise money. And then the push again towards overall health and how food connects to health. One thing my students really came to was that everybody drives to school. So at my school, we have no busing. So either kids have to walk, ride their bikes, or get dropped off in a car. And when we did our audit, because that's what I told the kids, was that they needed to do an audit. I was like, you can't just say everybody drives to school. If you don't know, you need to do a survey, you need to ask kids, you need to figure it out. And they did. And what they figured out was that over 85% of our students drove to school, even though they lived fewer than 2 miles from school. And they had a problem with that. So they really pushed for biking to school. And what they found out was that most kids did not know how to ride a bike. Gage Park, where my school is a little dangerous in terms of riding on the street. There's not a lot of space to learn to ride. So a lot of kids don't know how to ride a bike. So they contacted our PE teacher, who's in this picture right here, and they got together and they wrote a grant, and they got, I think, 45 of these little bicycles here to give to the kindergartners and first graders so that all of the kids could learn to ride a bike in kindergarten and first grade. And then this year they've started tracking, and what they found, which I think is like the most exciting thing, is that we went from about 85% of all kids driving to school to 60% in 1 year. And they get to own that. They get to own that success and that data and celebrate it. And I'm really, really proud of them. Looking here for these systems, and especially growing around food and these ideas of climate resilience and health in general, whether it's, you know, mental health, emotional health, physical health, cultural health, economic health. You know, I think Paul really brought up an important point that, like, we have to think about financing and how money plays into this. But with the combination of science and partnership, like, our systems really do allow for a lot of saving in all these things that I would think, and I hope that my students would agree with, make us healthy. I really do believe in these things here at the end about all of this work and all of these things being authentic and impactful. So it really is this idea of culturally relevant community action. I did a presentation with Pilot Light, I think it was a couple years ago now, and about this very idea. And a teacher asked me, well, what does that even mean? Like, what, can you give us an example of culturally relevant community action? And the best answer I can ever give is that it is done with the community, for the community, by the community. And we can be a part of it to some degree, but we cannot be the entire project. Unleashing creativity has been really fun. I'm not an art person, and I have definitely been humbled. I think the best part about being a teacher is I teach 13 and 14-year-olds, and when they are so much better than me at something, it is a very humbling experience to be like, hey there, little kid, like, you are very impressive. I'll never be there. And the arts and creativity is something that I've been very impressed with them. You know, their ideas are they think of things that I never would. My big passion, I'm a graduate student right now, and my big passion is in and around storytelling in schools. And I am really grateful that Pilot Light and some of the other organizations that we've worked with have allowed the students the opportunity to tell their own stories, not just create them, but to actually tell them. And it's something I feel passionately about, is providing the time and space to students to tell their stories, because otherwise, you know, those things get trapped inside and then potentially lost. And I think that's tragic. And then really, like, centering racial equity and justice with community history and intersectionality by focusing on health of the whole child. And again, it's kind of what health means to that individual, because it is going to mean something different for everybody. And I think that that's important to recognize. Okay. So just as kind of a closing point of where we're going next. So this right here is the top picture is our next section of the grass that we started clearing out. We're putting in a rain garden and really devoting all of that area to non-native plants, which I'm personally very excited about, and I think the kids are as well. my big push on the kids this year, I really do believe in, I always tell them that I'm going to step on the gas, like you better get in the car, is outreach, whether that is trickling down. So my school is K-8, and whether it's the the 7th and 8th graders working with the younger students, like you see here in this picture, or going to different schools, or educating through technology. So they've built some really great partnerships. We are traveling up to the north side in May to participate in a climate summit with a few of the other schools in the city and outside, which I'm really excited about, and the kids are as well. It was kind of scary. I said that we made this connection and that I can bring 30 students to the summit, and they needed to apply. And I had over 100 applications for the summit. And that was very scary and intimidating, because now I have to actually choose 30 out of the 100. And I don't know if I can do that without it breaking my heart, but something to think about over spring break, I guess. I really do want them to leverage this technology and teach those who are younger than them to build that solid foundation of food, climate, and environmental science. In that bottom right picture there, that outline in red right now is just a big grassy open field. And we pitched the network. The students wrote a research paper, which was really kind of cool. I helped them with their citations, and the social studies teacher with what is a primary source, what is a good source and a bad source. But they pitched the network, and they got approval to turn that grassy area into an outdoor learning space and classroom. And then they've been fundraising in order to get finances for that space. And this is for next year. So that's the most exciting thing about it, is I have 8th graders who are leading this project. They've raised over $2,000 to transform this space. And it's a space that they will not put a shovel in the ground. They will not get to use it or utilize it, because we're not going to be able to do it until next year. And yet they are just so passionate about it. And they are the ones who are spearheading it, because they know it's going to benefit those who are coming next. And I think that that is just the greatest. Okay. So thank you. I don't think I got to everything in the chat, but go ahead, Paul, if you had anything else.